When it comes down to training arcs, most of the time people do not like them, only for the sake that they know that the stakes aren't necessarily up there, because for the most part, most training arcs rely on the main characters just growing stronger, learning new abilities, but that's the uniqueness of the training arcs as well as why they are important. It's to show our main protagonists on their progression, how they are growing from what we had seen them in a previous arc and reaching new heights that they probably would have taken longer, or if not, probably not reached it, depending on the series. As something like, say, Dragon Ball, the original Dragon Ball, had training arcs. Something like My Hero Academia also had a training arc of sorts during their third season before everything went all over the place. And I mean, there's tournaments and stuff that also takes the story in a whole different direction. But the purpose of me saying all this is because the Hashira Training Arc is extremely important for many reasons, but more specifically, it's to get Tanjiro ready for what is essentially the final battle against Muzan and his upper moons. Because what happened at the end of last season of Nezuko conquering the sun has completely changed the entire game of Demon Slayer, because Muzan now knows that there's a demon that can conquer the sun, and all he needs to do is get his hands on her, and that's game over. Every Hashira, every Demon Slayer, every human is just screwed, which is why this arc is important, even though it could feel for many boring, filler, all this other stuff. It still plays a vital role, especially for Tanjiro and a bit of Zenitsu and Inosuke, as everyone learns something in this arc. So what I'm going to do is go over what each training for each Hashira was important, what makes it important for Tanjiro's growth. Before we get into that, though, I'm making this section of the Sanemi and Obanai stuff, because I think in the manga, this arc was just 11 chapters, which isn't very long for most of these arcs. So what makes this special is that Obanai and Sanemi don't really get a lot of screen time, which gives the animators a chance to expand the episodes by giving us more of these two, the Serpent and Wind Hashira, and how they fight, and there's little portions of things, adding more characterization to these two that don't really have a lot of it in the manga, which is pretty unique in its own right, and it expands more on them. I mean, I personally hate Sanemi. I think he's a jackass who doesn't really deserve a lot of sympathy, but even then, I'm impressed by his skills he shows in the first episode, and the little tease of the Infinite Castle, which is brilliant on the writer and animator's part. But it is a slight diversion to the main core of this season, which is mainly Tanjiro's training, but it is nice to see a different side of things, a more additional to the story. Now, to start things off is a return of a former Hashira, Sound Hashira Tengen Uzui. His whole training purpose was fitness and stamina, and since he's obviously hasn't been fighting for a while and is out of, not necessarily out of shape, but more or less hasn't been able to increase his strength, it makes sense to start him off in the basics, because he's no slouch. And the anime actually takes it one step further. Since we don't see a lot of it in the manga, the anime does take it to the point of showing us more or less how his wives are doing and how they're thanking Tanjiro for how all of his hard work, and how literally Nezuko was the reason that Uzui survived that whole thing, as well as kind of showing like a different side of Uzui, but also the amazing battle between Uzui and Tanjiro, showing us just how much Tanjiro has really grown throughout literally this whole since Entertainment District all the way till now, that he's able to go toe-to-toe with Tengen. And Tengen, even if he's only fighting with one arm, he shouldn't be underestimated. The dude is still a shinobi. He knows how to fight despite his little handicap. Now, for our favorite Miss Hashira, Muichiro Tokito, his is rapid movement training, which is to ease up and tense up muscles more smoothly for better body coordination. And honestly, I mean, it's clear that Muichiro has a bias for Tanjiro. Even all the other Demon Slayers are aware of this, and Muichiro does a bad job of showing that he has favoritism. However, the thing about this one is that it's a lot of connections with the other Demon Slayers. It kind of expands more that the other Demon Slayers are people. They're all kids. Like, even Muichiro, he's 14. Like, they're all fighting to the death against demons, and they're all in early teens, late teens. Like, they're still kids in the end of the day that are put in such a position that they won't get to live a fulfilling life because most of them will die. It's already known for sure. And that was the point with Muichiro's training. Like, yes, he's basically helping Tanjiro in his rapid movement, but it's also conveying that they're still kids. Like, they genuinely just threw away what is a childhood to fight, to become warriors that are protecting regular civilians, adults, from these demons. And I will also add, we do see Muichiro training against Obanai and Sanemi, and it's just cool to see just how big of a potential Muichiro on his own right has against these two upper Hashiras. Although you could say that we don't see a lot of the love Hashira Mitsuri, like her flexibility, it's kind of more or less on the point. And also, I mean, poor dudes, they kind of have to suffer through that kind of torturous training. But I think it's more funny to the fact that Mitsuri is obviously acquainted with Tanjiro after the events of the Swordsmith Village arc. And this kind of translates in her letter with Obanai. And the dude gets super jealous as hell, which causes animosity between him and Tanjiro. Granted, not as badly or well, worse than Tanjiro and Sanemi's like hostility towards each other. But the main point for that training, the Serpent Hashira's training, is sword skill revision. Essentially kind of using the movements of like a snake to help at least make the sword kind of be able to move at any direction. And the visuals for the completed Tanjiro's ability of completing this task is impressive as hell, as it is trying to avoid hitting any of the tied up demon slayers, as well as avoiding getting hit by Obanai's attacks, which, I mean, the visual says it all. Tanjiro is vastly improving his skill set, as well as learning new techniques. Granted, though, the hostility being there doesn't really make it any easier for him to learn, but he's still willing to nonetheless. Now, for Sanemi Shinazugawa's training, the infinite striking training, which is just mainly Sanemi letting out his steam and beating the shit out of any demon slayer, I think Tanjiro doesn't really need this. But this is more or less not about the training. It's about a lot more into Sanemi and Genya's family issues. After we kind of learned last season that Genya sort of threw his brother under the bus by blaming him for their mother's death, as well as all of their other siblings, it did affect Sanemi a lot, and obviously the relationship sort of went like really bad. Tanjiro does try to fix that, despite how much he obviously dislikes Sanemi, but he likes Genya a lot more and views him as a friend, so obviously he's gonna help his friend. Granted, this completely went badly, and I mean, it sort of resulted in the two having a fight because Sanemi was genuinely trying to hurt Genya after he learned of Genya's little ability of eating demons, and Tanjiro wasn't going to allow his friend to get hurt, so he throws in Zenitsu into the mix, as well as holds off Sanemi, which is more of an impressive feat because obviously Sanemi's not holding back. And Tanjiro was able to fight him off, I believe, from the early day all the way till nighttime, basically. Yeah, the two were kind of banned from seeing each other, but it's part of the course, really. However, it kind of just shows Tanjiro's resolve to actually be able to stand up to people like Sanemi. Now, for the last of the main training stuff being the Stone Hashira Gyomei Himejima's muscle amplification training, this one was more of putting everyone to the test. Although it is optional to leave the training and kind of be it incomplete, it's those that have the determination to actually be able to complete the training are the ones that'll make it through to the end. And Tanjiro needed this because it's one of his ultimate tests, being able to do what Gyomei can do. And although Gyomei kind of took off one of the tests because he kind of figured, yeah, people are just not going to be able to do it, he had the three big trainings: the waterfall, the logs, and then pushing the rock, which Tanjiro was able to do all of them, with Inosuke coming in second, and then Zenitsu's whole little arc of almost doing it, and then receiving specific news that'll be more important for the final arc for Zenitsu. But the fact that Tanjiro was able to do it and was able to unlock the Demon Slayer mark to show you just how much this thing really does amplify every aspect of a human is impressive, as well as it gives us more insight into Tanjiro's limits. And completing this training obviously kind of gives us a gauge of just how strong he's gotten from the beginning of the series, really. He's really improved a long way. But this also provides a little more bonding with Genya, who, despite how he treated everyone at the beginning, he's definitely started opening up and being way more kind to others, showing his real kindness to others. And as well as Gyomei and Tanjiro conversation, with Gyomei accepting Nezuko and Tanjiro, because although Tanjiro could have taken credit for killing Upper Moon 4 for, sacrificing his sister, he told the truth. This is more of Tanjiro's personality of, he said, no, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be able to make a choice. Nezuko literally had to push me to it, which pushes Gyomei's more part of how, the children he took care of in the orphanage, because he was, the one in charge there, despite being blind, they all sort of kind of got themselves killed, and one of the girls was so in shock that he got the blame for all of their deaths. And yeah, he kind of had a slight distrust, and Tanjiro is so pure that it literally kind of allowed him to be able to accept Tanjiro, just as other Hashiras have become to accept him and Nezuko. Now, in terms of the Hashiras themselves, because they all also get training as well in order to improve their skills and reach the level of unlocking the Demon Slayer mark, which is important because this is how they're going to be able to boost their power in order to beat all of the Upper Moons and Muzan, since their current forms aren't enough to do it. Now, they do get a lot more lore information about it, as well as a little more insight thanks to Muichiro, which poor Mitsuri, she really did try, but she kind of did the same thing Tanjiro did, as they're not able to explain what the hell happened. But upon also learning all of this, and with the whole training stuff, we also have Gyu and his arc of not feeling like he should be standing with them because of his past, and how his friend Sabado literally did everything and was the only one who died because Gyu couldn't help, he was helpless. And that kind of brings in Gyu's inferiority of being a Hashira. But it's also a testament that he made it to that level, and it took a lot for him to see that, really. But also Tanjiro's growth with him helps with their bonding and stuff, as well as seeing a bit of Gyu versus Sanemi in a training match, kind of showing more of Sanemi, but also kind of showing two different styles, one we're familiar with and one we're not 100% familiar with, clashing around. All of this, though, culminates in something very, very important. the last episode. The last episode had Muzan, after having his new upper moon for, find the exact location where the head of the Demon Slayer Corps is located. He pays him a visit. The two leaders of their respective factions finally meet. And this is important because this was all a trap. They knew that they were going to be found, and it was better them than Nezuko being found first. And not only that, but Gyomei was the only one informed of this, since the other Hashiras would not have allowed the master to, well, essentially blow himself up, use himself as bait, and be able to harm Muzan, at least enough to where he is going to be not as big of a threat, even if it's temporarily, since he has to heal from all of that. But Gyomei is the one that understood, as the more capable one, the more mature one out of the group, to be able to handle his master literally sacrificing himself, allowing all the other demon slayers to let that rage finally sink in more than anything else, and their desire to kill Muzan to increase infinitely more. And yes, the final episode had one of the best fights animations in the entirety of Demon Slayer so far, because this is it. Like, they are fighting the final boss, all of them. And unfortunately for them, the final boss is cheap and decides to teleport everyone, because this is it. Like, both sides understand that this is the big clash. This whole season was the calm before the storm, and we are now at the storm. Every Demon Slayer is in the Infinity Castle because it is time for both factions to finally face each other, no matter what, with everything they got, with all the training each side, the Demon Slayer Corps, had, and the demons having all gathered together to make one final assault. That is the culmination of this arc. It is just training them for what is essentially going to be the biggest, most bloodiest, most destructive final battle that'll literally decide the fate of everyone in that planet, essentially. To wrap it up, I would like to re-point out at the beginning of this video. I understand people want straight to the fighting. They want to not get halted by the story, get this little few training, a little bit of lore stuff. They just want to go back into the big action. They want to see this villain go down. They want whatever the hell they feel like. Everyone's entitled for their feelings. However, I think we should note that this arc shouldn't be dismissed. Yes, it is a training arc. It does slightly halt from all the fighting against, like, the demons, the main upper moons. Yeah, it sort of halts it, but it's supposed to show a little more character development from not only just Tanjiro, but Zenitsu, Inosuke, Genya, the Hashiras. Everyone is getting development. A little more lore behind Gyomei, even Kyu, like learning more of the world, expanding it just a little bit more, and as well as setting everything up to what is essentially going to be one of the best arcs that people are going to love. The Infinite Castle arc and the final arc, Countdown to Sunrise. Because trust me, this is literally the calm before the storm. I would also like to just say how amazing the anime did of just expanding more of Sanemi, Obanai, a little more of Muichiro's training with those two, as well as expanding more on Uzui's training and just showing just how much Tanjiro really has gotten. Like, all of this is just to show amazing animation, but to show this is Tanjiro now. Back then, when we first met him in episode 1, he was just a helpless kid who literally was almost able to kill Gyu, but it was still not enough. This one was not going to be able to avenge his family or save Nezuko. But the current Tanjiro we're seeing right now, the one that's confronting Muzan, that's telling him that this is going to be your end, Muzan, that he's going to make sure of it as he's falling in the Infinite Castle at the end of the season. That Tanjiro is going to be able to do all that. He's going to be able to stop Muzan and save his sister.